Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our partner showcase this afternoon. Willow, would you mind go ahead and sharing your screen? And as Willow shares their screen, I am going to launch our first poll. Welcome to eBraille Explained, Tools, Features, and Impact. As we get started with this webinar, as always, we're going to ask you a few questions about who's with us, how you heard about us, and what it is that you do. Willow, can you advance the screen, please? In that introductory set of questions, we're also going to ask the question on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 means not at all and 5 means very familiar. How would you rate your knowledge of eBraille? And that is today's topic. And we are ecstatic about you being with us here on the 11th of June. Willow, would you mind advancing the screen again? Thank you. So as I mentioned at the outset, this is a partner showcase, and there are a few ground rules. First, because it is a partner showcase, there are no ACV ERP credits available, so there will be no opening or closing code. Throughout the course of the next 50 to 60 minutes, we ask that you drop your questions in the chat. There is no such thing as a foolish question. And as Willow and I have done this a number of times, we're very good at keeping an eye on questions as we're presenting. And then captioning is available. We are using the automatic caption tool at this moment in time. Shelly and I are going to try to figure out some issues with the manual captioning. That's why we were a little bit behind. So Willow, did I? Yes, I did launch the poll. Okay. All right. So as you guys are completing the poll, will you advance the slide one more time? So here with us today is Willow Free. Willow is the Technical Innovation Product Manager, and Willow is just getting back from a conference in Amsterdam where they presented to the Tactile Literacy Conference. Do I have that right?
The Tactile Reading Conference, but yeah.
Tactile Reading Conference. So as we were talking a little bit about it before we got started, and uh, it was described to me as one of the best conferences there has been. So look forward to hearing a little bit more about that over the course of the next 60 minutes as well. We are very lucky and fortunate to have Willow with us today. Over the course of the last couple of years, there's been a lot of work on this project. Willow has been leading it, and we are getting very, very, very close and looking forward to eBraille and eBraille Access coming up here in the very near future. So with that, I am going to go ahead and end the poll. I'm going to share the results. I'm going to do a little summary, and then I'm going to kick it over to Willow. So when we ask the question, who is with us today? The majority of you are teachers of the visually impaired. There are a few assistive technology specialists and a few students that are out there, as well as the category of other. If you wouldn't mind, drop into the chat what other is, and that'll also help us ensure that the chat is working. Where are you from? As I look down through this, we really have an evenly dispersed group from all parts of the United States as well as Canada. There are a few folks from Europe and a couple of other countries that we hadn't specified. And then, as usual, most of you heard about the webinar through email from APH, so we're grateful that you take a look at those. And then lastly, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 meaning not at all, and 5 being very familiar, how would you rate your knowledge of eBraille? So I'm going to go down through this. 18% of you don't have any knowledge. 27% of you would be less familiar. About 33% of you are right in the middle. 12% are familiar, and 9% of you are very familiar. So, and I'm glad to see that the chat is working. So we've got a transcriber, tech product specialist, and APH employee. So welcome. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Willow. Just again, a reminder, if you've got questions over the course of the next 50 minutes or so, please drop them in the chat. Willow, it's all yours.
Great. Thanks, Sully. Hi, everyone. I'm Willow. Willow Free. My pronouns are she, her. I've been at APH for 13 years, and I started as a Braille transcriber. My focus has always been Braille. Um, I got into the tech side of things, starting as a QA, so quality assurance. I did testing of our software and hardware products while they were in development. And then from there, I became the Braille technology product manager. And now I've moved over to, you probably are familiar with Greg Stilson. I've moved over to Greg Stilson's team as a technical innovation product manager. So working on eBraille, working on the Monarch, and yeah, having a great time. So thank you all for being here. Let's get into the agenda. So the agenda. What is eBraille? That's going to be the first thing. I saw there were some folks that were still not quite familiar with what eBraille is. So we'll go through that. We're also going to talk about creating eBraille files. So these are the two big questions, really: creating eBraille files and reading eBraille files. We did all this work. We wrote a specification. It's very technical, but if you write a specification for a new document type and there's no way to make that document type, you've wasted 2 years of your life. So luckily, we do have ways to make eBraille files and to read eBraille files, and I'm sure that's what folks are going to be most interested in hearing about. So we'll cover those, and then we'll talk about the timeline, and finally we'll close with a demo of the BRF to eBraille converter. And again, I love getting questions while I'm presenting. I've got the chat window open. So if there's anything that you're confused about, please go ahead and throw it in the chat. If it's something I'm gonna be covering, I may skip your question momentarily. So don't worry about that. I will get to you. But if it's something maybe I forgot to cover, um, I'll be really grateful that you asked. So please feel free to throw any questions into the chat. And with that, we're going to start with a question for you all. So a poll. When I think about eBraille, I feel excited, scared, nervously excited. What is eBraille? And then other. So please just let us know how you're feeling. Hopefully, if you are nervous, I can help assuage your concerns with this presentation, but please don't be shy. And you're not going to hurt my feelings.
All right, so as they are responding in, you want to weigh in on how the jet lag was either coming back or forth from Amsterdam?
The jet lag there was way worse because they're
Yeah.
6 hours ahead. And so I did not get a full night's sleep most of the nights I was there. There
Mm.
was one night I slept 12 hours. And other than that, I slept like 4 hours every night. It was pretty bad.
All right.
But coming back, it was like I never left.
Good.
I got right back into the time here.
Good. All right, I'm going to share the results now, but I've got more Amsterdam questions for you with future questions. So, all right.
Okay,
So,
cool.
all right. So the good news is that the scale is tipping to excited about when I think about eBraille. And then next would be nervous excited. And then we've got what's eBraille and other. Fortunately, nobody responded with scared. So very good.
Yeah, that's great. I'm happy nobody is scared. All right, so let's get into what is eBraille. Some of this will be familiar to folks, but so what is it? It's a new Braille document type. And basically what happened is APH, the DAISY Consortium, and over 40 other organizations around the world came together to create this new Braille file type called eBraille or eBRL. So, and in both cases, it's a lowercase e starting it and then a capitalized B. So eBraille. Um, and the whole idea here was being aware of how Braille was changing. We've got the Monarch. Everybody's excited about the Monarch. It's a great new way of interacting with Braille, creating Braille, consuming Braille. Well, it also presents the beginning of an issue for the old way of doing Braille because Braille is hard coded. And so it's hard coded to the size of the page available to you. So we knew very early on in working on the Monarch that if we didn't do something, we were going to run into an issue with Braille content. And that issue, it's not the Monarch just by itself, but it's the Monarch combined with the other multi-line Braille displays that are going to come out, after both, in the near future and in the far future. I think we're entering a dynamic multi-line Braille future, and we're going to end up having, the same way we have lots of choices, not tons, but we have lots of choices for single line displays. There will be lots of choices for multi-line displays. And those choices will only get more diverse as time goes on. And so if we'd stuck with the old standard as the only way of making Braille, we were going to end up in a situation where our Braille libraries became segregated with some files being made for embossing, some files being made for the Monarch, some files being made for this multi-line display or that multi-line display. And before you know it, your library, is filled with all these different versions of the same book. If you really wanted your book to be able to be consumed on any multi-line display, you'd end up having to make, 8 or 9 versions. And transcribers are wonderful people, but I can tell you that those versions would not be free because when you change, with the old static BRF file type, when you change the cells per line, you have to basically redo the transcription. You don't have to redo all the work, but you have to go through and review and make sure everything's falling correctly, make sure your line breaks are happening correctly. It's not free to do a change like that using the old file type. So we needed something new to avoid this problem. And so that was really the main problem we wanted to solve was we've got this new way of consuming Braille, and we need a document type that can help fulfill that need. So let's talk about the advantages of eBraille. And in talking about those advantages, hopefully folks will get a better understanding of what it is. So the main thing is it's based on EPUB 3. You're probably familiar with EPUB, but if you're not, it's a print document type that's been around for a while. And it's basically a package. And in that package, you've got your text, you've got any images, you've got basically it's CSS, which is directions for how to display that text. And it's all packaged and bundled up. And you've definitely used EPUBs. You may not realize you've used EPUBs, but if you've ever used a Kindle or Kindle software or any other e-reading software, you've used a kind of EPUB. Even the file type that the Kindle, for example, uses is based off of EPUB. And so you in some way will have some familiarity with EPUB. And there were a ton of advantages to doing it this way. By basing it on this existing file type, we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We didn't have to come up with everything from scratch. Our specification is actually relatively short because we didn't have to go back through and define EPUB. We just defined where we're different from EPUB, and made properly, an eBraille file will uh, will validate. So it will, if you checked it, it would count as an EPUB. So an EPUB wouldn't be an eBraille, but an eBraille is an EPUB. And we'll get into those differences as we talk about it more. But we got a ton of advantages by just starting from something that already existed. The big one is support. So there's already tools that read EPUBs. There's already workflows to create EPUBs. And so we're able to kind of piggyback off of that work with eBraille. So the big thing that's most important, in my opinion, is markup. So you may have never heard of markup, but markup is it's basically tags in the file that go around the text. So you have like your paragraph, and then at the beginning of your paragraph, you have this tag, and it's got a P in it. So it's a P tag. And then you have a closing tag at the end, and that's also a P tag. And so you've got these two paragraph tags at the beginning and the end. They're invisible to the person reading the book, but they're not invisible to the software that person is using. So the software sees these tags, and now it knows, okay, this is a paragraph. And the advantage you get here is now that paragraph can be formatted to fit any page size. With the old
Mm.
file type, the BRF, it's hard coded. There is actually no such thing as a paragraph inside a BRF. It's just a set of lines that are next to each other. There's nothing in there telling the software this is a paragraph. And so the markup is the really key thing that makes eBraille special, because it allows us to know where the headings are. It allows us to know where, what's a list, what's a table. It makes everything else possible in its own way. The other difference is it uses Unicode instead of ASCII. If you're not familiar with ASCII, the main thing to know about it is that the A in ASCII stands for American, which I'm as proud of as anyone else, but it is a localized standard. And if you're not familiar with it, you probably are, but if you're not familiar with it, you can think of ASCII as the keys on your keyboard. So you're using the keys on your keyboard to create Braille. So, the $ is the ED symbol, the exclamation point is the THE symbol, and only when you apply a font to it, right? So you've already probably figured out one flaw. One flaw of using ASCII is you have to have a font. And if you're sending your file to someone else that's going to be reviewing it visually, they also have to have that font. If they don't have the font, they won't see the Braille that you're intending them to see. So that's flaw number one. Flaw number two is, being an American standard, ASCII's used in a lot of places around the world, but it's not used everywhere. There actually are other, it's called an encoding, and there are other Braille encoding systems. And so if someone else is using a different encoding, you may not even know it. There's no information in the file telling you that they're using a different encoding. And so in their encoding, instead of the exclamation point being the THE symbol, it could be something else entirely. And so you'll apply your font, and your font is based on the ASCII system, and you'll see incorrect Braille. And so it makes Braille difficult to share around the world. Braille displays have to account for these encoding issues. Unicode, if you're not familiar with Unicode, it is an international standard. So there's actually an international body that governs Unicode. It sounds like a great job. I wish I had it. But one of the things, if you're not familiar with Unicode, think of emojis. So every emoji is a Unicode character. So in addition to like smiley faces and laughing faces, there's also all the potential Braille symbols. So every Braille symbol is available in Unicode, both 6 dot and 8 dot. And so now you don't need a font. So you don't need a font. You've got an international standard, so you know that the person on the other end is seeing the same thing you're intending them to see. And you just get that precision, which as a transcriber, I can tell you, the main thing about Braille is its precision. Like it has to be right. So that's the advantage there. The other advantage is it contains graphics. So with the old standard, there was nothing linking the graphics to the Braille. You just had a folder with your Braille in it, you had a folder with your graphics in it, and there was nothing really putting them together. And one method that students use, as you'll probably be aware, is they'll have their single line display. They'll be reading their Braille on their single line display, and then they'll have their stack of tactile graphics sitting there next to it. Well, now the kid has to like intuit which graphics go where. And if their graphics get out of order, now they've got an additional problem, and there's nothing really telling them what graphic goes where. With eBraille, not only are the graphics bundled with the rest of the Braille, but there's also a link associating it with its exact location and alt text. So for the first time ever, alt text is required for tactile graphics. And I think this is huge. We know from research that if a person is prompted what a tactile graphic is before they review it, they will have a much easier, better time understanding the graphic. If you tell them this is a graphic of the water cycle, now they don't have to waste time figuring out, oh, those are clouds, that's rain. They can just get right into it, understanding it. And so for the first time ever, we'll have alt text. And so if we go back to that example of the student with the single line display, well, now they've got alt text. So now they can see like, okay, I'm looking for a graphic of, let's say an elephant. And then they go over to their stack, they find their elephant, and they know they're looking at the right graphic. They're not just relying on like the print page number or something like that. And then the other advantage is links for navigation. So you can finally put links. So links in your table of contents, links for your footnotes. The way footnotes are done in Braille is not it's not easy to find where you need to go to check your footnotes. And so now you can just jump from the symbol to the footnote. And in addition to that, with the markup, you can now navigate by heading, you can navigate by page number. There's all sorts of ways you can now navigate within your Braille file for the first time ever. Like there's really not been a way to navigate a Braille file in this way. So some other advantages, it'll benefit all multi-line and single line displays. So as long as those displays can use a screen reader, they can use eBraille. So even your Refresher Braille 18, if you can use your Refresher Braille 18 with JAWS, you can then use it with your browser or your eBraille reader or your EPUB reader and access that eBraille file. And we actually took there's some special considerations that I won't get into. It's kind of technical that we did to make sure that was as easy as possible. The other thing is it opens new possibilities for digital delivery. So right now, with that static BRF file, if I need to update your BRF, I basically have to replace your BRF. That's just the only way to do it. Well, with eBraille, one day what we'll be able to do is we have enough information about um, the file, that instead of just completely replacing your file, we can just add the new pieces to your file. And so I envision a day when the student on the first day of class opens their book, they've got volume one, and then without the
Mhm.
student even knowing it, a week later, when they open their book, they've got volume two and volume three, and volumes continue to get added, changes, fixes, proofreading continues to happen as the child's book is being delivered to them. And that, you know, that that's something that we're still working on and thinking about, but it wasn't possible before. It is possible now. I'm not saying it'll be easy, but it is something that we can do because of the way eBraille's structured. And finally, it'll make it easier to share Braille around the world. The big thing that eBraille does is it separates the content from the presentation. So the content is the Braille itself, the text, and that's inside those tags. The presentation is how that Braille appears to the reader. So let's say you've got your main heading. In Banaland, where I live, that main heading would be centered. But in other places, maybe it's not centered. Maybe it's in cell 5. And so with eBraille, because we've separated the presentation from the content, you can have the same content, send it to any other country, and then they can apply their presentation to that content. And then you can do the same. This will be especially beneficial to UEB countries because you already have the same Braille code, the same language, and now when you're sharing Braille files, you'll have the same formatting that you're already familiar with. So it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of advantages. If folks have questions, please pop them in the chat. And then we have another question here. Um, if you're ready for that, Sully.
All right, I am ready for that. So the feature of eBraille, which I am most excited for, is navigation, dynamic formatting, tactile graphics, metadata, and other.
I didn't
So,
really talk. I didn't really talk about metadata. Metadata is the information about the file. So it's title, author, Braille code, language, grade level, subject, things like that. You were going to say
so
something?
well, as the audience is responding, I wanted to ask the question. So going back to Amsterdam or visiting, if you're a traveler, is it a must on your bucket list in Europe?
I think so. It was a really unique place, like because of the canals. Like there were canals everywhere, canals, bridges. I'm a big fan of bridges. I don't know why, but I just love bridges. I think they're beautiful and they're everywhere. And it just had a very unique look. And if you've ever heard about the cycling in Amsterdam, that's real. So everyone has bikes. There's bikes everywhere. They're kind of terrifying. Uh, I rented a bike while I was there, and I made the mistake. I didn't notice what time it was when I started cycling, and it was 5:30,
Mm-hmm.
which is rush hour.
Oh,
And yes, it was terrifying.
all right. All right. Well, we have about 61% of the audience that has participated. We're down from about 70% there. Well, I'm not sure. I'm going to end the poll. We will review the results. So 32% of you are most excited about the navigation, 32% dynamic formatting, and 32% tactile graphics. Funny, nobody was interested in the metadata. And there's one other, so perhaps someone can drop that one other in the chat. And then we've got a question. Is there guidelines available on how to create eBraille? I think this is probably a good segment question.
Yeah, so that is our next topic, which is creating eBraille. So thank you.
Imagine that.
Yeah,
Yeah. We did
Thank you
not,
for the perfect question.
we did not ask Marjorie to do that, by the way. That was
Yeah.
completely on our own.
So yeah, thank you. And so creating eBraille files, I think this is one of the big questions. And I think the one of the main answers is going to be is Duxbury. So Duxbury Braille translation software. Duxbury is one of the world's most popular Braille transcription programs. It's available in all kinds of languages. Their development team has a deep knowledge of international Braille. They were a part of David Holliday was a part of developing eBraille, and he knew so much about international Braille and how Braille is formatted around the world. An interesting little fact here that I learned from David is Braille, no matter where you are in the world, whatever language, goes from left to right. So even if your language goes right to left, the Braille always goes left to right. And when you think about why, it seems obvious. It's the technology. It's because the Braille displays, the embossers, they all go left to right. So that's I think an interesting fact. And we have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to wrap up
Yes.
this slide and then hop over to some questions. The other advantage with Duxbury is it utilizes markup. So if you've used Duxbury, you're already using markup. Those tags you see in the kind of working view of Duxbury, that's markup. And so it's a pretty natural transition for them to support eBraille. And so they're finalizing the Save As eBraille feature now, and they're also committed to opening eBraille files. Opening eBraille files, I think, will be really great within Duxbury because not only will that allow you to edit eBraille files you've already made easily, it'll also mean you can emboss your eBraille files. So let me get into some of these questions. So the other was the ability for content to be provided, then presented in different formats and for different displays. And then Mary asks, can you use APH's Braille Blaster? That's going to be on a slide later, but we are adding Braille Blaster or eBraille 2 Braille Blaster. That'll be coming hopefully before the end of the year, but we'll be working on that. And then we had a question sent directly to the hosts and panelists. It's a few questions. What will single line Braille display users get out of the new standard? The main thing you're going to get is even on a single line display, if the Braille wasn't made for your display size, what you end up getting is a full line of text and then a short line of text and then a full line of text and then a short line of text as it's trying to display those 40 characters from the file that was made for embossing. And this is one thought. One sentence is now broken up across 4 lines with one line having a few, 5 words, the next line having 1 or 2 words, and that's not an easy or fun way to read. So you got that, you got the alt text, which we already talked about, you've got the links, which we already talked about, and then you've got the navigation via the markup. So now you're in a Braille file that was made as a Braille file, and you can navigate by heading, page number, the same way you would a formatted print file. And then how will our Braille displays be able to get support for this new standard? So the main thing you're going to want here is if you have an older display, you're probably not going to get native support. Older displays are going to struggle to open eBraille files because they're larger and they're a bit more complex than the former standard. And a lot of the older Braille displays are really low power, but you can open it on your phone, on your computer, on your tablet, whatever it is, and then use your screen reader with your Braille display to read your eBraille that way. And then you get all the advantages as though you were reading it natively. And then how will we be able to create eBraille on, say, a Brailliant BI 40X? Creating eBraille files on Braille displays is not something that I've been involved with. But I imagine as the standard gets more support, we'll continue to see support there. Oh, this is a lot of questions. Um, and then Carla asks, can Braille 2000 be utilized? Unfortunately, Braille 2000 is not supporting eBraille at this time. I'm hopeful that they will support it. But in the meantime, I'll talk about the converter so that folks can, if you've got Braille 2000, you can just make a BRF and then you can use the converter to create eBraille. Will agencies have to convert their files? That it's up to each agency. I know I've talked to a lot of libraries around the world, and a lot of folks are just excited to actually convert their files. And I think the eBraille converter makes that easy. Should we wait to update Duxbury? That's a personal choice. I can't answer that for you. And I don't know when the update's coming. And then there's some discussion of how much Duxbury costs. Cool. So we got through that faster than I thought we would. But yeah, great questions. Thanks, everybody. So the other way to make eBraille files is the DAISY pipeline. The DAISY pipeline isn't going to be familiar, I think, to a lot of the folks in the United States. It's used a lot more in Europe, but it converts file types like EPUB, DAISY, and PEF. And it's great for a quick conversion. They've actually already implemented support for eBraille in a version that we're testing now. It, pulls in your tactile graphics. It, allows you to add metadata. It's a really nice system that they've worked out here. Then we have the BRF to eBraille converter, which I'm hoping to be able to demo at the end of this. And the converter uses the rules of Braille Formats 2016 to apply the necessary markup. So Braille Formats 2016, that was created by BANA. And basically that's the blank lines and the indents. And we look at those blank lines and those indents and we guess. It's an educated guess, and we're typically right, but we're basically like, oh, this is centered. There's a blank before and after. That's a centered heading. Oh, this one has a blank before and starts in cell 5. That's a cell 5 heading. This one doesn't have a blank and starts in cell 3 and then runs over to cell 1. That's a paragraph. So that's roughly how it works. And one of the cool things about it is it's open source to encourage improvements. So we want people to take the work that we've done and, we've localized it to the, American, Canadian standards. But, if you want to use it in England or Australia or any other place, you can, do the work to have it recognize your formatting. And it can also be incorporated into existing Braille transcription systems and software. So if there was a company that didn't support eBraille, they could actually hook the work we've done and just get eBraille that way. So it lowers the bar for adding support. So a quick question is, what is metadata? So metadata is data about data. And so in this context, it ends up being, it's the title, the author, the subject, the grade level. It's things like that. It's helpful for users to organize their own books or to find a specific book. It'll make it easier to find, say, like if you've got a ton of books and you want to find all your books by, say, I don't know, Danielle Steele or something, you can look for that author and then now just see only those books. The eBraille, so this question, it was sent to the hosts and panelists, and it's, will eBraille make it possible to update books from eBay to UEB? And eBraille doesn't do anything with the actual Braille itself. So the translation of the Braille is unaffected by eBraille. So we won't have any impact on that. All right. So future developments. So we talked about APH's Braille Blaster. We're working on that, and it is free, as I saw in the chat, people talking about that. And then another one is Sao Mao Braille. So if you haven't heard of Sao Mao Braille, they're doing really cool stuff. So it's a free Braille transcription program available. They're located in Vietnam, but it is available in English, and it's free. And they're doing just really cool things with making it easier to make Braille. And they've been helping the working group that's working on eBraille, and they've expressed interest in supporting the file type. They were just waiting for the spec to be published. And so, spoiler alert, we're going to be publishing the spec soon. And then I'm going to be reaching out to them to see if they're still um, uh, willing to add that support. And then, even though the spec's about to come out, we're going to continue working with the community, the international community, to encourage further integration. We've actually had a lot of interest from major publishers, like outside of our field, to make their libraries available in eBraille. So there's some really cool stuff hopefully happening here in the next year or two to make even more eBraille available to folks. All right, let's talk about reading eBraille. So we've talked about making eBraille, we've talked about what eBraille is. This is how you would actually use eBraille, and we've talked about it some already. So, we covered early one of the advantages of eBrub is eBraille can then be opened in any EPUB reader. So a good one is Thorium. Thorium is a free EPUB reader, and you can actually open eBraille files in it now just by changing your file extension from eBraille to EPUB. But you can also open it directly in your browser. When I do live presentations, I'll often say, who here has an EPUB reader? Raise your hand. And typically, like one or two people raise their hands because almost no one uses a direct EPUB reader or is aware that they're using a direct EPUB reader. But then I say, well, who has a browser? And of course, everyone raises their hand because everyone has a browser. And so that's why browser support was so important to us, because now, folks can open their EPUB or, their eBraille in their browser, read it with their screen reader, and have it that way. And we're hoping to have even more support than what we're talking about here, thanks to that relationship to EPUB. So it has built-in accessibility. So screen readers can already support reviewing and editing eBraille files. We've talked about pairing it with a Braille display and also the advantages on a single line display. And then again, like we started this process because of that multi-line feature. And so dynamic formatting pairs well with the multi-line Braille. And the Monarch already has early support for opening, reviewing, and navigating eBraille files. The Monarch is the first device in the world to natively support opening eBraille files. And we're continuing to work on that experience. And by having everything set up the way that we do, it makes connecting the Braille and the tactile graphics to a seamless experience. On the Monarch, it's actually really cool how quickly you can go from the Braille to the tactile graphic and have everything at your fingertips. It makes for a very pleasant reading experience. All right. So that was how you can read, and there's going to be even more coming in the future as more Braille displays, more multi-line displays, add support for eBraille, and as we get more solutions available on phones, tablets, and computers. So with that, we have another question, and then we'll talk a little bit about the future, and we'll do our demo.
All right. All right, so we've launched our poll. So after you're hearing more about it, eBraille makes me feel better, very excited, cautiously optimistic, still nervous, or other. And so I have my last question for you, Willow, and that is the cuisine. So, how was the cuisine over in Amsterdam, and did it put a dent into your triathlon training?
Um, like I couldn't really find Dutch food. Like they really like burgers, so there were burgers everywhere. They really like French fries.
Hmm.
Like there was one place that just specialized in loaded French fries.
Ooh,
Yeah, yeah. And so, but the food was really good. I did enjoy the food. They've got, I don't know if you've heard of the Stroop waffle, but it's like a
nope.
little cookie thing.
Oh.
I don't want to start an international incident, but they're not very good. They're not very good.
We have Michael weigh in on that
Yeah,
and provide a
yeah.
German perspective. And when is the triathlon? And again, did your eating set you back in your
Um,
triathlon training?
so the the triathlon's in August.
You're in now, by the way, because we've announced it, to
Yeah, yeah, I
some.
have to now. And the eating didn't, but I did. I don't normally smoke cigarettes, but in Europe you can get French cigarettes, and I couldn't resist smoking French cigarettes, and
Yeah,
that probably hurt my triathlon more than anything.
got it. All right. All right, well, we're back up to 70% participation. So probably people wanting us to stop talking. So 6% of you are feeling better, 70% of you are feeling excited, 12% feeling cautiously optimistic, and 3% still a bit nervous. So congratulations. And I guess there is a question in the chat about Music Braille, but maybe you can do the demo and then we can get to that question.
Yeah, and I can answer that question quickly. Like eBraille works really well. So the question's about Music Braille formatting, and eBraille works really well with Music Braille because of how Music Braille puts the importance on the um, the beginning of the line. And so because of that, we know where the beginning of the line is. We can do special markup to make sure that's clear, and we can handle line breaks and all of that cleanly. So we're still working on the Music Braille part of it, but there's nothing about Music Braille that would mean it won't work with eBraille. And a lot of the people in the working group care a lot um, about um, Music Braille. So trust me, it's not going to get forgotten. Um, we have another question. I can answer this one quickly. So, once the reader has jumped to a footnote or endnote, is there a way to get back? So they're getting back after you've jumped is a feature of the reading system. So the reading system can handle that. It'll know where you were and it can jump you back and forth. So we don't actually have to add anything special to make that possible. Reading systems will already, if they have link support, they won't even have to do anything special themselves. It'll already be baked in. And then let me talk about the converter. And Crystal's asking when it's going to be available, and I'll answer that as we're going. All right. So I've got the converter open. It's on my screen. Hopefully everybody is able to view that. And it's a pretty basic program. So when you first open it, there's three tabs. There's the general tab, there's the page settings tab, and then there's the metadata tab. And then above that is the conversion profile, which I'll get to, and then a very basic help menu that'll get expanded as we go. So we'll start with the general tab. The general tab is where you tell us what you want converted. So you start by pointing us to the BRF you want converted. There's a browse button. So it says input BRF. You do browse, and then you find your eBraille file.
And
And
you found your Braille file.
yeah, sorry, your Braille file. Thank you. I say eBraille so much that, yeah, my brain just substitutes it in. So I found my BRF. And then there's a checkbox for images. So if you've got tactile graphics, this file does, but I'm going to go ahead and do it as an example without tactile graphics. And then you do your output. So you tell us where you want your eBraille file saved. I'm going to put mine on the desktop. I'm just going to call it Sample Treasure Island. And then my computer's been very sluggish. So I've got it, everything's set up. Now before, there's a convert button at the bottom, but before I use that, I want to run through the page settings and make sure my page settings are correct. So I talked about these conversion profiles. There's an APH interpoint and an APH single-sided. And the main thing here is the presence of the Braille page numbers and how those work. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it on interpoint, but when I look at the actual options, the first option is has running heads. So is there a running head in your file? In this file, there isn't. So I'm going to go ahead and uncheck that. And my conversion profile's already changed to custom. Then we've got our cells per line, which is set for 40. I don't need to change that, but I could. Lines per page, 25. Don't need to change that, but I could. And then odd Braille page numbers and even Braille page numbers. Even set for none, odd is set for bottom right. Well, in this file, I didn't put Braille page numbers. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark both for none. So now I have no Braille page numbers. And then odd and even print page numbers are both on the top right. Nothing I need to change there. So I've got my conversion profile. I've set it up, but let's say I don't want to have to do that again. I can go up, there's this little options button next to the drop down. And then when I click on it, I get the option save profile. And then I can name my profile. And I'm just going to call it special eBraille because I made this file for eBraille. And so I've saved my profile. And now in the future, instead of having to do all this again, I can just select my profile. So if your printing house or library or whatever, a school does Braille differently, you don't have to keep selecting your options every single time. We'll jump to the metadata tab, and I'm not going to fill this out, but here's where you could put in your title, your creator, producer, cell type, all that information. You can also add additional metadata tags and remove your metadata tags. So, I mean, it's pretty simple and straightforward. Like it's literally tell us what you want to convert, tell us where it is, give us some basic information about the file, and then do your metadata. And then I'm going to click convert. It'll get converted very quickly because it's a short file. And now I have an eBraille file. And I'm going to bring it over here. Right now, it does create it as just a zip file, but that's because it makes it easier for us to review. And so I've opened it up so you can see the inside of the file. So we've got the Braille itself, we've got the meta information, and then all of this information, the index.html, the MIME type, and the package.opf, these things are for your reading software. So your reading software is able to use all of this information to read the file. But I'll go ahead and extract it so we can actually look at it. Like I'll open the index.html. So when I open that up, these are all of the headings in the book. So now with this one file, I can jump to any location in the book. So I can jump to chapter 6, the captain's papers. And now I've got all of my Braille here in front of me. And, I can make it larger as well. So, and now, I can just go back and then I can jump to a different location. And now, I'm reviewing this file in, I don't know, I think a cool way that's like never really been done before with a Braille file. I noticed there was a question in the chat. How does it work with larger tables and formatting? it it does the same thing regardless of the file size. So it really is just looking at, where are the blank lines, where are the indents, and then it's making a very educated guess about um, where or what formatting needs to go there. So it does take it slightly longer with a bigger file, but we're talking, instead of 1 or 2 seconds, it's going to take more like 30 seconds. So we're not talking a long time. And when I say 30 seconds, that's like a big math book. So with thousands of tactile graphics and pages and all of that, we can do that in about 30 seconds, maybe a minute, but not long at all. And what I've shown you here is just it's the graphical version. So this is the version for your average user. So we were asked earlier, when is this going to release? Our plan is to release it in August, and this will be available for anyone to use. You'll be able to download it from the APH website, and you'll be able to start converting your files and trying them out. And there's also a command line version. And the command line version is going to be particularly interesting to large organizations. We'll have more information about that. But basically, if you want to point us, if you've got the command line version, which will also be available, you can just point it at your library and basically start converting your Braille files en masse with a little bit of setup. So rather than sitting here, click, 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 click for each book, you can just have it running, converting all your files very quickly. So there's um, there's a lot that you can do, and there will be EPUB to eBraille conversion that's available with the Daisy pipeline. But it's it's my time now, so I've really enjoyed getting to present and speak with you all today. And I really want to thank you for joining and for your curiosity about eBraille and about Braille generally.
And we would like to thank you for being back in the partner showcase. I think I've said this numerous times that Willow is capable of bringing forward some really technical information and explaining it in a way that many, most all of us can understand. So thank you. And we have this Changemakers podcast as well that we do. That Changemakers title certainly applies to you as well. The work that you guys are doing is making big changes. There are some questions that are in the chat. We will fish those out. We will get some answers to those, and in some follow-up to you, we'll try to get those out. And if you would like to learn more about the Monarch, you can reach out to sales@aph.org. We'd be happy to schedule a demonstration for you. And so with that, Willow, thanks so much for sharing not only your knowledge about eBraille, but your trip to Amsterdam. And will you come back to tell us about the triathlon?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I love it. All right, guys, have a great summer and look for more of the partner showcases coming in July, August, and September.
Cool.
All
Thanks.
right, bye.
Bye.